It is our duty to take the children with us to remove them from their environment. Either we win over any good blood that we can use for ourselves and give it a place in our people, or we destroy this blood. These were the words of Heinrich Himmler, a mastermind of the Nazi ideology. In his intention to create a superb race, he designed a wicked project called Lebensborn, generating racially pure children. A project conducted in the whole of occupied Europe found the most fertile ground in Norway. It bore nothing but bad fruit, only thousands of innocent children who were victimized even long after the Nazis were gone. Welcome to History Unveiled, and today let's discover the dark truth about the Nazi breeding in Norway. Heinrich Himmler, the second man in Nazi Germany, was obsessed with racial purity. He believed that loyalty, the strength of will, courage, and honor could be inherited, as well as physical attributes. According to Himmler, only the Aryan race possessed these virtues. Hence, he demanded from his men and their wives proof of pure Aryan ancestry. On December 31, 1931, Himmler established the Race and Settlement main office within the organization he commanded, the notorious SS. To recruit SS members, the office first compiled a list of racial values. It went on to establish broader principles in German public life after the Nazis took power in Germany. The emphasis was on improving racial stock by promoting racially pure individuals and eliminating those who were not. According to Himmler's regulations, SS members were allowed to marry only certain kinds of women, as their offspring were planned to be the new ruling class of Nazi Germany. The vicious plan went as far as recruiting young women who would make good breeding partners for SS officers. As part of his final plan, Himmler established a new agency within the SS in December 1935, the Lebensborn. Translated as the Well of Life, the agency was tasked with assisting SS families with many racially valuable children. Under the agency's control were newly established child care facilities for mothers-to-be. Regardless of being married or not, women were obliged to prove that both they and the father were of Aryan stock dating back to their grandparents. The clinics provided them and their children the best possible care in return for giving birth to a child of exquisite biological excellence. As soon as the child was born, mothers could keep their babies or leave them with Lebensborn to organize the adoption into a good German family. In both cases, children were brought up in accordance with Nazi ideology. After the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, Nazis began spreading Lebensborn throughout Europe. In occupied countries, Germans organized Lebensborn homes modeled on those already built in Germany to care for children born to local women and German soldiers. Here as well, racial purity was the main prerequisite for entering the program. For that reason, one of the occupied countries was labeled as the perfect ground for the Lebensborn project, Norway. Norway was not only of strategic importance to the Nazis, they believed the Norwegians had the purest Nordic blood, a resource they needed to carry out their racial program. After the country was occupied in May 1940, Nazis began conducting their Lebensborn program immediately. They encouraged their soldiers to engage in romantic relationships with Norwegian women, hoping it might result in the production of children of superb Nordic blood. During the 5 years of occupation, Lebensborn established a unique stronghold in Norway. Several branch offices were opened across Norway, along with 9 Lebensborn houses. It was a high number, considering there were 10 such facilities in Germany. What's more, the program was far more successful than any other occupied country, including Germany. It is estimated that around 12,000 so-called war children were born during the occupation, of which 8,000 were in Lebensborn houses. It was pretty astonishing, Considering the Norwegians' animosity toward the occupying forces, some historians believe several factors caused it. In Norway, the Germans took a more active approach to the Lebensborn program than any other occupied country. Secondly, the Germans had up to 400,000 stationed soldiers during the occupation. At the time, Norway had a population of around 3 million. These soldiers were stationed for long periods of time and lived in very close contact with Norwegian civilians. Therefore, a relatively high number of romantic relationships between them and Norwegian girls was not so unusual. Paradoxically, the factor that mainly contributed to Lebensborn's success was precisely the Norwegian animosity toward the occupiers and their collaborators. Girls who got pregnant with German soldiers were denied help from their friends and relatives and were forced to seek medical and material support from the German authorities. The Norwegians looked upon women who entered the Lebensborn program with great disapproval. What's more, a romantic relationship with a German soldier was considered treason. In one of his radio broadcasts, journalist Toralf Oksnavad, the Norwegian voice from London, warned that women who don't reject the Germans will pay a terrible price for the rest of their lives once the country is liberated. And so it was. On May 8, 1945, the Germans surrendered to the Allied military mission that arrived in Oslo. The Germans laid down their arms and went to prisoner camps. Their facilities across the country were shut down, among them all 9 Lebensborn houses. The whole country was free, except for the Lebensborn babies. Their suffering was about to begin. As was the case throughout most of Europe, women who were in a relationship with Germans and who had children were objects of hatred and contempt. After the liberation, the sentiment erupted into open hostility. Tiskertoser, or German girls, as people called them, were stigmatized and forced to wear armbands marked with the letter T. Organized mobs would draw them to streets where they would have their clothes torn, their heads shaved, or large swastikas drawn on their foreheads. The authorities were blind to such incidents. Moreover, the government issued a decree to separate these women from society. Under the pretext of protection from public assaults and preventing them from transmitting venereal diseases, German girls were sent to the National Internment Camp for women on the Hovedøya Island. As for about 3,500 Norwegian women who had married German soldiers during the war, a decision was made to deprive them of citizenship and deport them to Germany. Women who were interned were not allowed to take their children. Thousands of so-called war children were left without care. Society's hatred toward them was no less than that toward their mothers. After the war, Norwegian authorities seized the entire documentation of the Norwegian Lebensborn office, including the list of all the children born to German fathers. The way the Norwegian society and the government saw it, these children were outcasts and a problem that needed to be solved. The most desirable option for the authorities was to deport them to Germany, the land of their fathers. However, since the children were citizens of Norway, the option was dropped. A special war child committee was formed that ultimately decided to keep the children in Norway. Unfortunately, the government was also determined to keep the war children as far as possible away from society. They were thought to be predisposed to authoritarianism and fascism due to their half-German blood. In July 1945, a member of the Norwegian Ministry of Social Affairs said, "To believe these children will become decent citizens is to believe rats in the cellar will become house pets." The Norwegian press at the time claimed, "They are unable to become Norwegians. Their fathers were Germans. Their mothers were Germans in thought and action. They will forever constitute an element of irritation and unrest among the pure Norwegian population." The stigmatization of the children even went as far as claiming these children were inferior human beings. Some Norwegian psychiatrists believed only a mentally underdeveloped girl would want to fraternize with the enemy, and only an equally underdeveloped German soldier would be content with a girl like that. Consequently, the offspring of such breeding most probably would be underdeveloped children. The state's intention to cast off the children had broad public support. As the nation ended the war against the Germans, it immediately started a new one against their children. Most war children were sent to orphanages where children were abused, tortured, and raped. Hundreds of other perfectly healthy children were sent to mental institutions where they grew up alongside mentally ill patients. The level of their maltreatment in these institutions was inhumane. Reden Myking, one of the children transferred from Lebensborn houses to mental institutions, witnessed how she slept in a straitjacket for 3 whole years. Children lucky enough to stay with their families were subjected to daily taunting. They were forced to live with a social stigma for something they were not guilty of. In order to avoid such a fate, families sent children to Sweden and other countries where they could build their lives in a normal environment. One such kid was the famous ABBA singer Annie Frid Lyngstad, whose grandmother took her and her mother to Sweden while she was still an infant. Thousands of other war children were not so lucky and were forced to live a nightmare. Many of them, incapable of dealing with the burden, indulged in drugs and alcohol, and often ended their misery by killing themselves. Children bred to the elite of the Nazi Reich ended up sentenced to shame and alienation. In 2002, Norway apologized to these children, but failed to repay them with proper compensation. It happened so long ago, they claimed. For the Lebensborn children, however, traumas were so intense, as if everything happened yesterday. Do you have any more engaging stories to be told? Tell us in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching History Unveiled.